Hello everybody, it's Thursday, it's Lit Soc, and today we are looking, or Mr. Humphreys is going to talk to us about the Unreliable Narrator, which we'll come to in 1 second. There's been a trip today to the British Library, one of my favourite places, and Lucy's going to tell us all about it. Off we go.
Okay, so we were looking at the expedition for ancient Dunhuang, which is in China near the Gobi Desert, and we had like two parts of the day where the first part in the morning where we had like a talk with like a curator, and which was actually really special, which doesn't usually happen. And we had the talk with the curator, and then we went to the actual expedition, and like we had a clipboard, and we were looking, and we like had to answer some questions. Yeah. And then after lunch, which by the way was really nice. Good. I know. And we did some Chinese calligraphy, which I was personally quite bad at, because at first I really just wanted to colour it in and do it pretty slowly, but I wasn't supposed to do that. So I tried to do it normally and it didn't really work out for me. Okay. Unfortunately for me, I was right next to a Chinese person, so that doesn't make it easier for me to look at myself. And then then we started to go home, actually.
Okay. So this is all linked to the Silk Roads exhibition,
Yes,
isn't
the
it?
Silk Road. Yeah. That we had like quite a few quite long talks about it by the curator and someone else who didn't actually specify what their job was. Okay,
they might have just been facilitator. Yeah. Did you go into the Treasures exhibition?
No, I wanted to see the Magna Carta, but I think they forgot.
I don't think it's on display again.
They said it was I was told
now?
that Magna Carta was there.
Is it back on display now?
Apparently,
because when I was there last year, in June, it had been damaged, so they were having to keep it.
They damaged Magna Carta? That's mean.
Yeah.
Am I going to sound dumb if I say what's the Magna Carta?
Yes, it's the foundation of the democracy of the world.
Did you not learn it?
I think the ancient Greeks might have something to say about that.
Yeah, democracy.
It's an important milestone.
That King John agreed with his barons that he wouldn't imprison them or cut down their woods. Or
like, it's kind of like a bit like a greed tax and don't fish in the river.
For example. But yeah, it's one of the treasures is just a wonderful space. So many, treasures there. So hopefully,
it's the first time a king made an agreement with his nobles about correct behaviour.
Like I heard the name, but I didn't know what it actually was.
Yeah.
So it's like when in the time when the monarchy didn't necessarily follow the rules. So it was like one of the
Yeah.
Hugely significant.
1215.
Yes, that's the
yeah.
That was 810 years ago.
Time ago.
There were lots of celebrations 10 years ago. Absolutely. Yeah. There were.
Yeah,
because it was signed down at Runnymede. Do you know where Runnymede is?
It's in Surrey.
It is in Surrey. You're absolutely
That's
right. Near Egham.
Yeah, not far from here at all.
There's a great big strip of green, and that's where it all happened.
There are like some wooden chairs, and then
around
a table.
Yeah,
we saw it on the way to Year 7 trip to Legoland, I think.
Okay.
You guys go to Legoland?
Yeah, it was
Legoland.
Lego.
Right, school trips we have known and loved, but passing swiftly on
Okay.
to the Unreliable Narrator. Anybody know what this means, the Unreliable Narrator?
Oh,
okay,
well,
then,
Something I do know. It's when in the book the narrator isn't necessarily reliable. I hate to use that word again. But like you can't exactly trust them, and you can't be truthful with them. So in a book, you can't trust them that they will lay the specific the way of events. But they might put their own twist on it and like change it so it more fits their view or something.
Good. Okay, Annabelle, you want to add to that? We've got any examples that you can think of?
Well, one of my favourite books has an unreliable narrator where
Which is
13 minutes. And the main character has a memory of what happened, but not a full memory.
Right.
So she fills in the blanks herself.
Yeah, that's
Okay. Yeah.
Anyone else got anything to add?
What's that film with Guy Pearce?
Memento.
Memento.
Yeah, that's a good example of
Yeah,
one.
there's a film, a very famous film with exactly this issue. Can't remember things, and then things come back to him, and he's sort of reliving the same memories over and over.
But he's unreliable not just because of his short-term memory. There's other ways he's unreliable, but I can't tell you because then I'll give it away. But it's
well worth watching.
Very much worth watching. Directorial
Year 10 plus.
Yeah, Year 10 plus. Directorial debut of Christopher Nolan, of the Dark Knight trilogy, Interstellar. What was the one with the bendy buildings?
Oh, the bendy buildings.
Inception. Thank you, Josie. Much better title than the bendy buildings. And yeah, he did Oppenheimer as well. Let's not forget that. So basically, that's where he started with Memento. So that's a reason to watch it, if no other.
I've just realised with Inception. Do you think he had what were those books called where they pop-up books? Do you think he had pop-up books as a child?
Yeah. Now you mention it, it does seem very plausible. Yeah. But yeah, Christopher Nolan, great director, great film.
On in that film, not ever.
We should have a Lit Soc on it then, and on the films of Christopher Nolan. We'll book that in.
Okay.
Because he is a great director. Anyway, right, I should probably make a start because the clock is ticking.
Unreliable narrator, Mr. Humphries.
Unreliable narrator. So yeah, look, I will pontificate.
Indeed.
Thank you, because that's what I do best. Anyway, yeah. So what you said there, yeah, you're absolutely
Very
right.
good.
But essentially, their credibility has been compromised in some way. I think it's important to add that because I was just saying to Josie, you could argue that any first-person narration, but it's not just first-person narration, as we'll come to later, any first-person narration you could argue is unreliable. It's like, well, how can they possibly accurately remember all these things? So it's like there's going to be more to it than that. And so basically, for whatever reason, you can't trust them, and there are different reasons why you can't trust them. So why are they so popular? Stories of unreliable narrating. So if you think of why we all like stories, why we all like reading novels, storytelling 101 is things like, you can build tension, you can make it unpredictable, lots of twists and turns in the plot, and also, perhaps most of all, it lets you delve into certain themes, certain ways of telling the story.
There's also limited worldview, isn't there? Like Jane Eyre, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Limited worldview, it can actually lead to be used as a sophisticated literary device. Essentially, because if you can't take what the narrator has to say at face value, then you are kind of obliged to fill in the gaps yourself, as Annabelle was saying. Yeah, so you have to work a little bit harder, but of course it's rewarding because then you're almost like in on it with the author. You sort of like having a little nudge behind the character's back. So that's another reason why it's really you're kind of like in on it. I suppose you could say. Now the author in that situation, the author is not the main character. Jane Eyre, I think, is an example of where people say, well, this is a thinly filled autobiography. This is like wishful, to not give away the ending, this is wish fulfillment of what happens there. But really, they've got different values. The values of the author do not match that of their main character. So, you could argue it goes against the grain of, aren't we supposed to sympathise with the main character? It's like, well, not necessarily. It depends on the context. Now, there are so many examples. I'm just going to focus on 4 today because, we don't have time to talk about them, but I'm hoping that a few of you will want to pitch in with some ideas of ones that you've got. But as a little bonus, we're going to do a little unreliable narrator in action exercise. Okay, now before we started, I gave 3 of you a piece of paper with a name on it. Okay, now what we're going to do, this is very much based on a book. And we're not going to say, and I know, and I think Josie does as well, we know what book it is, but we're not going to say what it is. Okay, and we've got 3 characters. We've got Bryony, give us a wave, Bryony. There you are. We've got Cecilia. Thank you. And we've got Robbie. Where's Robbie? There you go, there's Robbie.
Excellent.
Okay, so what's going to happen, you 3? We're going to do this in 4 parts. I'm going to read out the background for everyone's benefit. And then you're all going to...
Not pieces of paper.
Then you can open your piece of paper, and you're going to read out... You'll notice there's 4 different segments, and then you're just going to read out that segment, okay? So we're going to start with number 1. So this is the background, and the order we're going to do it in each time, after I read my bit, is Bryony, then Cecilia, and then Robbie. Okay, got it? Right, so here we go. It is the summer of 1935. 13-year-old Bryony... Give us away, Bryony. Just to remind you, yep. Bryony Tallis lives with her parents, Jack and Emily. The family is well off and considered to be part of the landed gentry, which is basically upper-class landowners. Her older sister, Cecilia Tallis, give us away, Cecilia, just remind you, yep, there you are, has recently graduated from university along with Robbie Turner. There we go, so now we know who everyone is and how they're related to each other. Who is the son of the Tallis family housekeeper. Jack Tallis, so that's the father of Bryony, funded Robbie through university, because he couldn't afford it otherwise. Also visiting for the summer are Bryony and Cecilia's cousins, including 15-year-old Lola. Okay. One day, in the garden, there's an incident between Cecilia and Robbie, witnessed by Bryony. And now, over to you. So we'll start with Bryony.
So wait, do I
just read out the first extract?
One moment, Cecilia and Robbie were bickering about a vase, and the next thing I know, it is broken and fallen into the pond. There seemed to be a moment where they were really weird and tense about the situation. Then, Cecilia suddenly takes most of her clothes off and dives into the fountain to get the pieces. I felt very confused by what I saw, especially the way Robbie was looking at Cecilia.
Robbie and I were having a bit of a tiff about Daddy paying for him to go through university. He was being silly. He thought I was saying I should pay Daddy back, which I didn't mean at all. Anyway, he was trying to apologise, I suppose, by offering to fill the vase I was carrying, and when I resisted, it dropped into the fountain. I won't pretend I didn't enjoy calling him an idiot for it, and then showing him that I didn't need him to be my knight in shining armour. By taking off my blouse, skirt and sandals to pick up the vase he had made me break.
I knew better than to offer to help C get the vase out of the water. Not because I know my place as a housekeeper's son, more because she had a strong will and character. I'll admit that I felt hurt that she denied me the chance to help her, but I won't deny that I found the strong, independent woman vibe she gave off to be attractive.
All right, there you go. So that's just the first little tidbit. Okay, we're going to return to that in a minute. Right, so first book I want to talk about is The Turn of the Screw. Classic ghost story. Anyone heard of this one? Turn of the Screw? No?
Oh, you read it. But you've heard of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've heard of it, okay.
Yeah. It's creepy.
It's very creepy. And it's one of the earliest examples of the Unreliable Narrator, and it's one for fans of horror and gothic because it's a ghost story. Or is it? It might not be, actually. So this
It might be in the mind.
It might be. The basic setup is an unnamed governess has gone to look after two children in a house in the country, and both of the children are a bit troubled, particularly the boy, whose name is Miles, because he's been expelled from school. Okay, so he's got some baggage of his own. Now, shortly after she starts at this job, she starts seeing these two mysterious figures, two ghost-like figures, who she thinks are sort of tormenting the children and having a malign influence on them. And she thinks they're actually in danger, that these two ghosts are having a direct threat to their lives. Now, at the time, people thought it was indeed a straightforward ghost story. But later, people have been going, oh, actually, I'm not sure about this. I think the more recent theory is that the governess is all in her mind and she's made it all up. And actually, rather than the two figures that she's stalking the children, she's the one who's actually terrorising the children. That's the theory.
It's Benjamin Britten's opera. Benjamin Britten, big, enormous, very famous British composer. He wrote one of his most famous operas is The Turn of the Screw, and it's very, very, very creepy, but it is just a ghost story. It's not about... I mean, there is an ambiguity to it, but I've not seen a production where it is mostly the governess.
Yeah, well, there's been TV adaptations of it. There was one from, I think it was the late 90s, early noughties, that very much took the approach of that it is a terrifying ghost story, but there was a more recent one 5-10 years ago where it flipped it and went, no, the governess is a lunatic, essentially. So what is the basic? Why do people come to the conclusion that actually she might not be a reliable narrator? It might be all in their head. Well, she's the only person who actually sees these two spirits. No one else does. There's a sort of framing device as well at the start where it doesn't start with the governess narrating. It starts with some guy in a house talking to some dinner companions. Oh, this governess told me an interesting story, but she hasn't told anyone but me. So it's like, well, why hasn't she told anyone but you? What have you got going there? You've clearly got something to hide. And in that TV adaptation I just mentioned, they kind of play up the angle. I don't think they do this in the book. Henry James, the author, does this in the book. They play up the angle that, she's very anxious, very highly strung. These days, I suppose she would be someone who's got mental health issues. And they really say that, she's a lonely young woman and she's unbalanced. And they really play that up in a TV adaptation. Now, that's kind of like reading between the lines. But as it progresses and, the stakes get risen, it's a very short novella, by the way. This is actually another of his stories in here, the Aspirin Paper. So it's only actually about that long. So it's a novella. as we progress through the story, as the stakes get higher, she gets increasingly hysterical. Which, you might say, isn't that a bit of a misogynistic, outdated attitude? Women in peril, they get all hysterical. But it's like, well, it's because of her psychological state, of how she is and how as a person. So, so because of that, people are saying, well, is this an early example of the unreliable narrator? And it quite possibly is. It's essentially left to you to decide, as you're reading the story, whether she's telling the truth or not. She fits the profile of like the mad woman, which is an example of one of the archetypes of an unreliable narrator. There are other types which we'll go into. You have to decide who's telling the truth here. Now, speaking of deciding who's telling the truth, we're going to go back to our little scenario here. So I'm going to give you another bit of background. So, realising he's attracted to Cecilia, Robbie writes several love letters to her, declaring his feelings for her. He eventually settles on one of the several letters and gives it to Bryony to pass on to Cecilia under strict instructions that she is not to open it. Bryony.
It's no wonder he didn't want me to read the letter. It's absolutely disgusting. Clearly, Robbie was very annoyed by what happened at the fountain. He was humiliated to have a woman talk to him like that, and he wanted to hurt her. I would have gone to Cecilia, but I had to help Loa after her idiot young brothers attacked her. I told her about the letter, and she was quite rightly called Robbie a maniac.
Okay, so that's Lola who's saying that, by the way. Just remember that detail.
I didn't know anything about the letter, but what I did know is that I wanted to speak to Robbie before the dinner party that evening about what happened at the fountain. I certainly did not expect him to declare his love for me. It caught me unawares, but Robbie and I are childhood friends. It was all happening so fast and my head was in a spin, but I must confess, I do have some feelings for Robbie.
It was a mistake to give Bryony the letter. I should have known better than to trust a 13-year-old girl not poke her nose where it doesn't belong. The other mistake I made was that I gave Bryony an earlier version of the letter by mistake. I wrote that one in a passionate frenzy, and some of the words were perhaps ill-advised. But C was never meant to read that one, let alone Bryony. Anyway, the fact is, when I saw C before dinner that evening, I declared my love for her, and she declared her love for me.
Okay, there we go. So, feelings, Miss Huntley's starting to relive this, I think. But yes, feelings bubbling to the surface. Right, next I have a YA novel, which I hope some of you are familiar with. You've heard of it? Has anyone read it? Oh, come on, guys. No one's read this. Okay, it is perhaps slightly old now. It is probably, when was it published?
I recognise, Lockhart, the last name.
Yeah, she's written quite a few books. Okay, it is actually about 10 years old, to be fair.
I was only one.
Older than I realised. And of course, there's been other books that have got the word liar and lies in the title that since surpassed it, The Lie Tree. One of Us is Lying, which is one that I'm sure, there you go, there it is. But this is the one that broke down the door and started it off. This is the one you have to thank for being able to hold that book in your hands today, because this puts the idea of unreliable narration and lying in YA fiction on the map. So read this book. Now, I think we were talking about... what's it called? The Inheritance Games, yes? Yeah. And how we're going to do a Litsoc in this. This also influenced that, clearly, as well. I will explain. Sorry. So, look, first of all, now, to focus on the unreliable narrator aspect, first of all, it's clear from the title that, lying, that's unreliable. So that's it's not just the main character, there's multiple liars in this. And essentially it's her friends, no cousins, who the elder generation basically dubbed the liars. Now, this little gang of people, they're very privileged, and each summer they go to this island where there's there's a luxury mansion, there's luxury facilities, and that's where the Inheritance Games comparison comes in. Okay, now the main character is called Cadence. Now the reason she has to be she's not unreliable in the way that the governess is in this. She, and this is going to tie in with what Annabelle just said about one of the books she's read, she had an accident. And she has got partial amnesia as a result of it, okay? Now, her mum forces her to convalesce. Goes to Europe with her estranged father instead of going to the island one summer, against her will. I mean, I'd love to go to Europe for, an all-expenses-paid trip, but Cadence didn't want to, apparently. But anyway, the following summer, so 2 summers after the accident, She goes back, and the liars, the people she's on the island with, are all treating her very differently. They're all being a bit weird, and she doesn't know why. And also, they refuse to talk about what happened 2 years ago. They don't help it fill in the blanks. They keep it to themselves. Okay, so there's a big mystery there. So yeah, with all the baggage around what's here and the liars, if you like, as well as the Hadri, you can see what's going on here. There's a lot of ambiguity, lots of unreliability. Now I'm just going to read a little bit of it because this is a bonus. This is going to be a bonus to Miss Huntley because there's a bit of intertextuality here. Because the characters, you could argue, there's some parallels with another book which you could say has got at least one unreliable narrator in it. So this is a conversation between Cadence and Gat, who is essentially a love interest, but is also still at the same time being a bit weird with her and treating her a bit differently. But do you even want to see the whole picture, Gat asks. Could you even understand it? You won't know unless you try me, I say. I haven't heard from you in forever. You know what I am to your grandfather? What I've always been? What? Heathcliff, in Wuthering Heights. Have you read it? I shake my head. Heathcliff is a gypsy boy, taken in and raised by this pristine family, the Earnshaws. Heathcliff falls in love with a girl, Catherine. She loves him too, but she also thinks he's dirt because of his background, and the rest of the family agrees. Well, that's not how I feel. There's nothing Heathcliff can ever do to make those Earnshaws think he's good enough, and he tries. He goes away, educates himself, becomes a gentleman. Still, they think he's an animal. And then, because the book is a tragedy, Heathcliff becomes what they think of him, He becomes a brute. The evil in him comes out. I heard it was a romance. Gat shakes his head. Those people are awful to each other. You're saying Grandad thinks you're Heathcliff, that's Gat. I promise you he does, says Gat. A brute beneath a pleasant surface, betraying his kindness and letting me come to his sheltered island every year. I betrayed him by seducing his Catherine, his Cadence. My penance is to become the monster he always saw in me. Right, Wuthering Heights, Miss Huntley. Would you agree with me when I say there's some unreliable narration going on there?
Oh yes. Anybody read Wuthering Heights? No.
No.
Thing about Wuthering Heights is it's written by the sister of Charlotte Bronte, who wrote Jane Eyre. It hasn't got much in common with Jane Eyre, but apart from the fact that they're both Gothic novels. And the thing about Wuthering Heights is it's got 2 generations, so it gets incredibly confusing, certainly for the first time of reading it.
Yep.
But it's also got this, what we call a Chinese box narration, where you've got this frame, and then there are lots of narrators within it.
Yep.
And the first person to narrate, he's a real pain. He's an absolute pain.
He's a fop, isn't he?
And he's a nuisance, and he's living he goes to visit his landlord, who turns out to be Heathcliff. Heathcliff doesn't want to know about him, and he has this dream, and it all gets sort of out of hand, doesn't it? And I loved it when I was a teenager, and absolutely loathe it now. Absolutely loathe it now.
Yeah, I can understand.
Yeah.
But the point, so essentially, it's Lockwood, isn't it?
Lockwood, yeah.
And Lockwood. So get the
Nellie.
Yeah,
Nellie
now she's another one who's okay, what can we trust here? But the central conflict, if you like, at the heart of it is like the civilized order of the Earnshaws, and then the wild, untamed passions. And essentially what's going on here is it's a similar thing. Obviously, it's a different story, but you've got like the privileged narratives, sort of like excluding the less privileged narratives that are going on here.
Do you remember the Monty Python version?
No.
You've never seen it? It's by Semaphore.
Monty Python always does the big thing.
No, I haven't seen the Monty Python.
They're Kathy on one hill and there's Jacob on another with a big stovepipe hat on, and they're doing it with flags.
Oh right.
Semaphore.
Okay, that's. I think I'll have to take that out.
I think it's Monty Python, or it might be the two Ronnies. Anyway, it's
okay. I'll have to seek that out. Right. Anyway, so conflicting narratives. Now, speaking of conflicting narratives, let's go back to our story here. So, so part 3, Bryony walks in on Cecilia and Robbie having an intimate moment in the library. Oh yes. In the confusion, the two of them quickly exit, leaving Bryony stunned. Right, Bryony?
Is it 3?
Part 3.
Yeah. Lola is so right. Robbie is a maniac. He was forcing himself on my sister in the library. The letter was only the beginning. The man wants to hurt my sister, and it's my duty to protect her.
It all happened so fast, and my mind was in a whirlwind. 1 minute Robbie is my childhood friend, and we're arguing over a broken vase. The next he's declaring love for me, and I think I have feelings for him too. The incident in the library happened so fast, it's all a bit of a blur. And when Bryony walked in, let's just say I was embarrassed and had to get out of there.
Honestly, that Bryony is a pain in my backside. Why can't she leave C and I alone? I can't believe I entrusted her with that letter to her. Whenever I get a moment with myself with C, her idiot sister has to muscle in and spoil everything. Well, I'm not going to let that stop me. I love C with all my heart, and I know that we're meant to be together.
Okay, I can. We're leaving it in a tantalising moment there, and I can see the body language, bit of tension between the three characters here. All right, so this is one I've talked about before. I love this book.
You do.
This is if anyone says to me, "Can you recommend what's considered to be a classic, a pre-20th century classic that most people wouldn't have heard of?" I always go to this one because this is a book. It's brilliant, and it deserves to have a far wider audience than it does. Okay, so it's another gothic horror, because I love gothic horrors. What can I say? So the basic story is the narrator and anti-hero is a boy called Robert. Now, he comes from a somewhat it's set in Scotland, and he comes from a very troubled home life, essentially. He's brought up to be a radical Calvinist. Anyone know about Calvinism? Anyone do history, GCSE, A-level? So Calvinism, so if you think of Christianity, Catholicism, Protestantism,
Puritanism
Puritanism
run amok.
Essentially, yeah. It's like the most radical brand of Protestantism. And the idea behind one of the central ideas behind it is the idea of predestination, which is, we're among the privileged few. We are the chosen few. We are saved. We are predestined for heaven no matter what we do in our life.
Yeah, you can do anything, basically.
Yeah, you can do anything. And, of course, it's very radical and it's a bit fringe, it's a bit lunatic.
The sort of thing that Trump believes in.
Yeah, there you go. We've got a Donald Trump reference in for you there. And, yeah, it's almost cult-like, you could argue, just like Trump. Anyway, we're not going to talk about Trump in great detail. So, now, basically, this gives, as far as he's concerned, this gives him license to commit crimes. Anything that he likes. And that includes possibly the murder of his brother. And, of course, it's all okay because he's intends to go to heaven. And hence, I'm a justified sinner. I can do it because I'm going to go to heaven. Now, it's important to point out, you might come across as a cartoon villain, but he isn't, because he doesn't do it with sadistic glee. It's not like a moustache twirling villain rubbing his hands. I mean, he does have a cruel, vicious streak in him. There's no doubt about that. But, essentially, a mysterious figure called Gil Martin tells him to do it, who may or may not be the devil.
Oh, yes.
Now, so far you might think, well, this is a little bit like that one, isn't it? But actually, there's more to it because there are two narratives. There's his first-person narrative, but then there's what they call the editor's narrative, telling the story in the third person. The twist is the editor might well be unreliable too. Because the editor, it's made clear he's got his own agenda. He comes across as very pompous, very prejudiced against Robbie. And, he's very haughty, he's very judgmental. And because of all this, it's like, well, okay, what is really going on here? Because how can I actually trust this person who is just, determined to make it clear that this is a really, really bad person? He's brought his own biases to it. So just goes to show that, A, third-person narrative can also be unreliable. It's not just first person. And secondly, in combining a third and first person, this is one reason why I love this book so much. In combining a third person, first person thing, you can't tell who's telling the truth. It's very postmodern. It's very ahead of its time. So yeah, great book for that reason. And you have
very influential, I would say, on
Dr. Jekyll and
Mr. Hyde.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely
Both
is.
Also Scottish.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, clearly influential for that reason, and you have to exercise your critical thought and judgment to try and work out what's going on. And just to make it clear, and this is another postmodern touch, just to make it clear that James Hogg wants you to think that both of these narrators are unreliable. The reason the editor is able to tell us the story of Robbie is that he actually raids his grave, and he takes his story, which is buried in the grave, out of it to tell it. And James Hogg himself, in the way that Martin Amis appears in Money and other authors put themselves in the story, James Hogg writes himself into the story to express his disapproval and pour scorn on him for raiding his grave. So there you go. Very juicy. Right, now, speaking of approval and disapproval, I think we're going to go back to our last bit now of our story. Right, so here's the last bit of context from me. So after a notably tense dinner that evening, Lola's younger brothers go missing. During the search for them, Bryony stumbles across Lola being assaulted by a shadowy figure in the dark, who flees when she approaches. She quickly concludes it is Robbie, and a disorientated Lola confirms this. The man disappears. The next morning, Bryony identifies Robbie to the police when they arrive. Robbie returns, having found the younger brothers, and is arrested.
As if assaulting my sister wasn't enough, Robbie had to go after Lola as well. A 15-year-old girl. The man is a monster. He's now behind bars where he belongs. I don't know why, but Cecilia screamed at me when he was taken away. Well, if she says she loves him, then it's because the brutish man has forced her to. She may hate me now, but she'll thank me eventually, when she realises what a nasty piece of work he is.
I hate Bryony for as long as I'll live. It was dark when she saw the alleged assault. How can she be so certain it was Robbie? I'll admit everything has been a blur, but I realise now that I do love Robbie, and I hate my sister for what she's done to him.
Everything's a blur, isn't it? She's like that on sort of fever
Yeah,
dream. Get
I know.
on with it, woman.
Anyway, sorry, Robbie.
I swear on everything I hold dear that I am innocent. It is C I love, and I have no interest in Lola whatsoever. I wasn't even anywhere near her when she was attacked. I was out looking for the twins, and when I returned with them the next morning only to be arrested, it was a horrible shock, let me tell you. The real monster here is Bryony. I don't know if she has a crush on me, is possessive of her sister or what, but her malicious behaviour has ruined my and C's life. I hate her with a passion.
All right.
It's all about perspective, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so who do we think is telling the truth here? Should I give our three characters a chance to make one final statement to explain why they think
Bryony, do you think
they're in the right?
Do you think your version of events is the right one?
Do I see this as me or as Bryony?
Bryony.
Give us a summing. Imagine we're in a courtroom here. So Robbie's on trial. You're the principal witness for the prosecution.
It's because Lola told me, and she confirmed what I thought it was, and because she was the one who's assaulted, then that was true.
So it's a bit of hearsay, but it was also dark though, wasn't
Yeah.
it? Mm. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Robbie, what do you have to say in your defence?
Well, I was just trying to look for the twins so I could help see the girl I love, and I think that I just don't know what to do anymore because I've been taken to court even though I'm innocent.
Introduced.
And I don't know why Bryony is out to get me, but it's always been like this. So
It's always been like this. Why did you give her the letter then, in the first place?
Yeah,
It was always
exactly.
it
been
was
like this.
all like that after the letter.
Okay, after the letter,
Cecilia,
things went
you
downhill.
wish to defend your beloved?
Oh, well, I think, Bryony's young and she's being first influenced by Lola being only told what she
relies on
supposedly
rumour and
seen.
hearsay. Yeah.
And also, if it's just a shadowy figure at night, then there's no proof that it was Robbie, especially as Robbie came back with the twins. So
He has an alibi. So
What's his alibi?
that he's looking for the twins.
Can
Okay.
a twin?
By the way,
no one
can the
saw
twins
him?
not confirm?
The twins are very young.
At this period, they wouldn't believe the children, you see.
Yeah.
Oh.
1935.
Also, only when this is generally, but then wouldn't have been wouldn't he be? He could be doing anything before he found the twins, or while he was finding.
Yes.
The twins.
Yeah,
true,
that's a good point.
That's a good point.
Just
Yeah.
because you don't know where he is, you know what he's
If-
doing.
If Lola was disorientated when it happened, how does she remember? Because maybe it's one of the only male figures around her age
Yeah,
that she will remember.
good point.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
good
seems
point.
plausible.
Yeah.
Lola's 15.
yeah. How
And?
old do you need to be to go university?
Well, the thing is,
Yes, Lucy.
who's 15 or close to it?
Well, Annabelle's closest, I'd say.
Yeah.
Do you think you're gonna? Do you think you only can remember the male figures that you've seen before, that you know?
All right. Okay. So let's see. Okay. What do we? So you can now put your characters
So what do we
aside.
think?
Just be yourselves now, guys. So
So
who
who's-
do we think's telling the truth here?
Who's telling the truth? Be yourself, not the characters.
I think Robbie's telling the
You
truth.
think Robbie's
Robbie?
telling the truth?
Because
Okay.
honestly, it's people are just really. I think he's got the most logic.
Okay.
He's the most. We've got the pathos, ethos, and the logos here.
Oh, hello, Mr.
Because
Allen.
because he has pity on him, because he's innocent. He's got the most logical answer because he's young. No, he's not young. He's
Well, they're all young.
older
Well, he's older.
than Bryony, who
Yes.
is young and has a thing against him anyways. So why would it's just a good excuse to,
But why has Bryony got a
Yeah.
thing against him? Bryony, can you remind us why Bryony's got a thing against him?
because she thinks he's assaulting her sister.
Well,
Yeah.
also after the letter.
Yeah.
It's
he's
the letter.
convinced that
Remember what
he's
she?
mad about
Yeah.
sex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Any?
Okay.
So
Rhea, do you think Bryony's telling the truth, or
I'm not really sure. I think she has more evidence per se, because but you don't really know if Lola's saying the truth or not.
is Lola a reliable witness?
trouble is that
No.
if you know anything about witness statements, they tend to not. After an event, it's very difficult to remember
Yeah.
properly within literally 2 minutes of an event. It's especially if it's traumatic. So
The
Quite
thing
hard.
is, Brian is too young, so I don't know how she made this police claim and why the parents believed her, especially after going to uni. Why did she do that? And so that
why do you
I don't
think
trust
that might
Brian.
be? Well, why do you think that might be the case, Frida? That
I
they
think
actually
Brian is
believe.
jealous.
Okay.
Bryony's
and what about the
jealous.
parents, though? Why do they believe her?
I think they
rather than
believe
Robbie?
her because that she's one of them in a way. They're her
Uh-huh.
own.
So it's a bit like this all over again then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cecilia
Okay.
has-
And then Cecilia, why is everything a blur?
Yeah, I might have.
I think she needs to get glasses.
It's very,
I-
very hot. That's another thing. It's very unusual weather.
I might have overused that phrase a bit there. Basically, I was just the point to get across is that they're childhood friends, and
Things have changed.
Things have
literally
changed, and it's
within
gone
moments.
really quickly because
Yeah.
they were just childhood friends,
Yeah.
and suddenly within 24 hours, he's saying how much he loves her, and it's where's this come from?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the way I've written it was very simplified. Anyway, this is the book.
And here
This is
it
the
is.
book. Who's here? I mean, Josie, yes. Anyone else heard of this book?
I've heard of the word.
Well, I
I've
mean,
heard
I should
the-
hope
I've
so.
heard of that word.
I should
No,
hope
the
so.
same- I've heard of that book as
What
well.
does it mean? What does it mean? Atonement.
Don't give anything away now.
No,
Wait, sorry. I have
to
to
atone.
When did you learn this in English? Yesterday in PRS.
Atonement.
PRS.
In PRS, that should give you a clue,
It's like,
shouldn't
it's
it?
like the death of Jesus. It's like he sacrificed himself for humanity.
Humanity
Like,
for everyone
yeah,
else.
Yeah.
So he's
yeah.
atoned
So
I
will
know.
you atone to
for
what reason?
Sacrifice. For
But why was he?
sin.
He was atoning for.
Sin.
for
Yeah.
our
For
sins.
our sins,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So,
So it's a sacrifice.
who is anyone familiar with Ian McEwan? By the way, I should also ask.
Well, I recognise the name.
You recognise that? Yeah, he's written. To me, this is his best book, personally, in my opinion. But
I
he's
like Amsterdam myself.
Amsterdam's a
but-
good one. On Chesil Beach, Cement Garden, Enduring Love. That used to be
Nutshell. I like.
Nutshell as well. Yeah, so we got a lot of his books,
Hmm.
but this is my favourite. Partly because of the unreliable narration aspect, but it's just you saw Miss Huntley's emotional reaction earlier. It is puts you through the emotional ringer, but
Yeah, it does.
it's one of the few books that I remember after reading it. I wanted to read it again, and B, I was just like lying awake at night thinking about what I just read and what happened. Because all right, last call. Imagine you're the jury. Who do you who's telling the truth here?
Frida.
Robbie.
Okay. Lucy.
Who can I suspect?
Well, look, let's put it this way. Robbie's on trial, right?
Robbie's on trial.
He's been
Is he
accused.
guilty or not guilty?
He's not guilty.
Okay, not guilty.
Totally
No influencing the jury, please.
Oh, you didn't influence me. I had already.
What about you
Not
two? What do you
guilty or
think?
guilty?
You two, what do you think? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Pretty
Okay,
comprehensive.
Annabelle?
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Yeah, of course, Robbie.
Josie?
She said not guilty. And Holly?
Holly?
I'm feeling a bit of pressure.
We don't mean to pressure you. Honest opinion. Don't forget what everyone else has said.
I kind of feel like
You can't. Well,
guilty,
you
but,
can
like,
abstain technically, I suppose.
I'm feeling like it'd be too simple if it wasn't guilty at this point.
Well,
But like, I feel like it would be.
I'll tell
In
you.
the book, he's
He is. Robbie is not guilty.
Oh,
Yes.
Bryony, it is her naivety as much as malice.
Who
I
did
don't
it?
think she is malicious. So essentially,
There is malice from somebody, but
there
it's
is, but it's not from
Bryony.
her. She's just got mixed up, got
Is
confused.
it Lola?
But her actions do lead to Robbie being found guilty and going to prison. Now, I also want to add, before anything else, this is only part one that we've got to. We only got to the end of part one.
You're joking.
More stuff happens, but
Yeah, this is what makes it such a great novel, because there's much more to come.
oh yes,
Yeah.
It's worse than
It hurts me when
we
they separate
can't
the book.
we.
To the extent of
Yeah.
wanting to chuck it across. In fact, I did chuck it across the room, I seem to remember.
She had a different reaction to me then, obviously.
I did that for a book as well. I remember I literally chucked
But I've
it.
just-
I've seen Miss Honey throw books into bins for a Lit Soc. So,
You should catch that on camera.
well, maybe we will
in
one
those
day.
days we didn't.
We didn't. This is way back. This is when we first started Litsoc, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
this
So,
was when we. It was the sense of an ending, and
Yes.
I put in the bin the things that I didn't like the ending of.
and there's quite a few.
Oh, I read a book where I hated the ending. It
Can we
was such a
do
good
Litsoc on
book.
that?
And then
What,
the
throwing books into
ending-
bins?
No, like
Ending.
like
Books
such a
we
good
don't
book,
like.
but then the ending
Oh, yeah.
is
We
so
will,
bad.
don't worry.
Like
Oh,
honestly,
yeah.
It's
they
like that
could have
with
done
Jane Eyre.
so
Jane Eyre is
much
brilliant,
with
but
that
it has
ending.
a dreadful ending.
They could have done so much with that ending.
Yeah.
There was so much opportunity. It was
Yeah,
just
I read a good book too.
so
That
bad.
like, it was
Like,
good.
I
It,
read
it wasn't my usual style, but it's still a good book. And then they had this like super confusing ending. Like, I'm like, what's going on?
When I read one of those books, they had like a cliffhanger, and I thought, oh, so the cliffhanger's going to end the book. No, I flipped the page. The last page is literally explaining the end to all of the cliffhanger, and it's
No.
very unexplained, like really
Unacceptable.
badly explained,
That's-
and I
that's
don't
what books
understand
are.
it. And then there's not a sequel either.
What book is
So,
So if
well
you-
worth reading.
If you want to find out what happens after that, and so you could get the because Bryony is the main character, but there's other aspect. Unreliable narration is very very strong in this in part one, but also further on too, which I can't tell you about because I'll give it all away. But yeah, it blew my mind. So read this book; it's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very good.
Right, we've got about 10 minutes till 5. Who would like to talk about an unreliable narration book they've read? So if you come, Annabelle.
So,
Who's on your team?
Yeah, do you want?
Yes, please.
I'm going to
Yes.
talk about the book 13 Minutes. I don't have it with me now, but it's was one of my. It's probably one of my favourite books because it's kind of like it's a psychological thriller, so it's like my favourite genre, and I remember
So who narrates it?
it's in first person narration.
Yeah.
Who's
The
the
main-
narrator, though?
I forgot her name, but it's the main character. I read this book a year and a half ago, like 2 years ago.
All right,
But-
all right. So what's
The
good
main
about
character.
it then?
Basically, she wakes up and there's an accident where she
Yeah.
dies for 13 minutes, or
Uh-huh.
yeah, and she wakes up because she gets revived, and she doesn't have a very big idea of what happened. She knows the rough plot, but there are some people who do know. So it's a bit like that book, but they don't.
I mean, there aren't multiple narrators. There's just one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she convinced, because it's very unreliable narrator, because she's obviously in a very traumatic state after this whole thing had happened. A lot of the book she's gaslighting herself into thinking different things.
Gaslighting herself.
Yeah.
Let alone us or anyone else. Okay.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
she is very confused, which is quite a hard thing as a reader, but it also lets your mind wander, because I think the writer
like writ it in a way.
Wrote it.
I knew it.
Come on,
I did
Adam.
a Litsoc.
This is Litsoc. You're in year 9 as well. Come on.
Wrote it in a way that you could understand while
I only
the
voiced it
narrator
suddenly.
was confused.
Sorry, I'm just reeling from that one. Okay, sure.
So
And
that we're supposed to be confused.
Yeah.
but you're not. You're meant to be confused because she's confused. But the way that the writer wrote it
Thank you.
makes it not confusing for us.
It's all on camera, you know, Lucy. It's all on camera.
And I think that
It's really
it's
good.
a really good book.
Anyone else read it?
What book is it?
13 minutes.
I've seen like another book, but it's called 16 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think that's the
It's not the same book.
All right. Thank
It's-
you, Annabelle.
yeah.
That's really kind.
All right, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Unreliable narrator?
I can do mine. But it's
Go on,
like,
Frida.
it's not 100% unreliable. There's just
Lucy, are you
sections.
telling us about one of us is lying in a second? Or not?
There's
You
just
are?
like some bits
Come on then.
in it which make me feel like she's a bit unreliable.
Okay.
So it's
What is
Am I
it?
Normal Yet by Holly Bourne. It's
Oh,
a very,
right.
very, very popular book, I would say. It's about a girl and she's, I don't exactly know what she has mentally. Huh?
What's it say on the back?
Oh, she has OCD.
There's
Oh,
two in a
okay.
title, isn't it?
I
I normal, yeah. It's very.
And she has
subconscious,
OCD
Different.
and she's like a big germaphobe, but she's trying to live life at college without anyone really knowing. It's like she's doing lots of things and she's slowly getting off her medication and everything's like going back. And she, in the part, I'm not finished yet, she's going through a relapse. And she keeps on washing her hands and she's like, it's fine, I'm being hygienic, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. But all her family are like, it's really not, you shouldn't be doing that, your hands are bleeding. But then she keeps on telling herself, it's fine, I'm not gonna vomit, they will. And it's like, yeah, it's a really good book.
Holly Bourne's a very good author.
Yeah.
I haven't actually read this one, but I've read some of others. She comes highly recommended.
Yeah.
It's a really
She
good
deals with
you're
book.
good
enjoying
issues.
it?
I know Annabelle loves it.
I
Yeah,
love Holly Bourne.
I like started this on Wednesday.
Wow.
And you got her books aren't short either. They tend to be. Sort of
I will say
pages,
one thing
so-
though, my sleep has been definitely affected by this book. Like,
Not so good. What, you mean you're going to bed later?
I'm going
Because
to
you're
bed
reading?
later because
Staying
like
up
I'm
to read.
staying up and reading the book,
Fair enough.
which is like not a good thing, but it's totally worth it. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, by the way, we're donating books. We're going to have a
Oh, yeah,
book
we're
Yes,
doing a
we
book
are. We're going to
drive.
have a book drive.
book
Yes,
drive, World Book Day.
for World Book Day. I'll details to follow in a letter,
Yeah.
and I guess we make announcements as well.
But big thing at Litsoc, definitely.
yes,
Yeah.
Bring your unwanted children's
Bring
books
your
in,
unwanted children.
so long as they're in good condition, and so long as the books are children.
Someone
those
bring
are
in
the criteria.
Paddington. Someone has to bring in Paddington.
If they have it and they no longer want it, they might want to keep it. It's Paddington.
Yeah, if it's a
Yeah.
good book, I'm keeping it. Like, that is like the rules. Even
So you're
if
just
it's
gonna
a
give them
children's book.
really
You could
bad.
always
I keep
buy
I Love
one
You to
and
the Moon
donate
in
it.
that.
Yeah, that's another option
I
too, because
could.
the books go to children who can't afford to get books of their own. That's
Yeah,
the thing we need to
exactly.
emphasise here.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I should probably emphasise that when I
Yeah.
announce it formally.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Frida.
Frida. Anybody
Um,
else? Lucy?
I haven't finished it. Like,
No, that's fine. No problem.
so
is it unreliable? Well,
that
basically,
definitely, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
one of us is unreliable for sure.
It's literally in the title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's narrated by 4 people
Oh, okay.
because they all have been put into detention. It's quite clear from the beginning that they're not them being in detention is unfair.
Of course it is. Or always is.
Yeah, but aren't they going to say it's unfair, even if it isn't?
It is. No,
It's-
it's one girl was put in detention because
All of them were.
all
put
of
in
them.
detention.
Oh yeah, because of the phone, like
Yeah.
in her
Like-
bag that was ringing that wasn't even her phone.
Yeah.
So
why
she
did
wasn't meant to
have
be
it?
there. But someone put it in her bag.
I seem to
bag.
have heard this scenario before.
I wonder
Yeah, go
where.
on.
and so it's from all 4, and they're all in detention, and the person in school that nobody likes dies from drink.
Dies.
Oh yeah, there is a death in this.
It's at the
Oh,
very
it's a
start
murder
though,
mystery.
so it's like
Yes, murder mystery.
I think I read too many murder mysteries because I guessed the ending and I was right and I was really annoyed.
I
No, like I've got like
Yeah.
a 1 year murder
I
mystery.
don't know.
Like
But I know
read
what
so
you
many.
mean. Sorry, carry on.
And so, he dies from a an allergic reaction, but it was
Oh.
purposeful. But the police conclude that it was purposeful,
Oh, purposeful. Okay.
because like there was no like EpiPens in the nurse's office that there usually were, and like his EpiPen had been stolen, and like there was literal, and they also later got some messages that from the murderer describing how they did it.
This is hideous. And you're reading this, and you're 7. Good grief!
It's very, very popular.
Is that Red Dot?
Hugely popular.
I met the author and I talked to her, and it was literally the best
you
thing
met
of my
her?
life.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
wow.
talked to her.
I love her.
Yeah, when and where?
A book event. I also met the author of Inheritance Games, and then they did like a talk with another author of like Signed, Sealed, Dead, and they all did like a talk, and then they were doing like book signings where you could actually speak to them.
So you haven't finished it, so
Annabelle
you
has
haven't yet
connections.
discovered which one of them's lying.
Yeah.
Right.
Doesn't she?
Okay.
But
So we
some
wait to
others
hear
will
then.
know who is lying, of course.
Yeah, who is
Those who've
lying?
read it. Can't say.
can't
'cause you-
say.
'cause you
No,
give it
all
away.
right then. Okay.
Sorry, Miss Anne.
Josie, are you coming to talk, or you got a?
I got frightened.
Yeah, Frankenstein's a good one.
But like,
All right, thank you, Lucy.
Oh.
Thank you, Lucy. You can tell us again about it when you finished it. Okay.
So when I saw that the theme was Unreliable Narrators, my first thought was Frankenstein.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too.
And so there's 3 narrators in the book, but they're all connected together. So you start off with Walton, and he's sending letters to Margaret. Is it?
Yeah, Margaret,
Margaret,
sister.
his sister. And he comes across this really weird man who is Victor Frankenstein. And
He is a weird man.
He is
Obsessive.
obsessive. And
Hunted.
Walton describes him in a very favourable light. He describes his like words as being like the sweetest thing he's ever heard.
No, it's just bizarre,
But
isn't it?
while Frankenstein is describing how he dug up dead bodies and stitched them together to resurrect his creature. So when you start reading the book, you start to get this idea that the creature is this horrible character, and it's not until part 2 where you actually get the creature's voice, although it is then funneled through through
Walton's all
Walton.
one of them,
Mhm.
isn't it?
But you then hear, because Frankenstein describes as soon as his creature awakes how terrifying and how he's trying to murder him.
His yellow eye.
But as soon as you hear the creature, he says that he wakes up and he tries to reach out to the person he sees as his father, and he's immediately abandoned and is alone, and then has to deal with
it's a great read, by the way, everybody. It's a great read.
And I think what's like really interesting is the way that unreliable narrators are used to kind of make you question as well your perspective, because although it is kind of hinted at that Walton and Frankenstein might not be fully telling the truth, or definitely putting it in a light which is arguably false, as soon as you can hit the creature, although the creature you find has done awful things, you do start to question as well yourself what you were judging him for, because you start to question it is a thing of nature versus nurture, and yeah, I think it's one of the most
It upends your perspective, right?
Yeah.
Which like all good unreliable narration does. Because who's the real monster here? That's the obvious question, isn't it? So yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, it's a classic.
And
read it.
you like it?
yeah.
You do like
I really like Frankenstein. I like Never Let Me Go too, but I prefer Frankenstein.
Yeah, same.
You never know what's going on.
Yeah, no, that's another unreliable narrator.
It's another unreliable.
Yeah, here we
Well,
go.
yes,
We've got,
yeah.
we've got this one set by Ishiguro,
This is
The
even
Remains
greater.
of
Have
the
you read
Day.
this one?
No, I.
Oh no, it's
Another
really worth
unreliable
reading
narrator.
that.
It's really good.
And An Artist of the Floating World is another one.
Mhm.
They're all deluded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you.
Jess. Thanks. Great.
Do you want to round this up? You got one? you wanna
Okay,
talk about?
I will very briefly talk about The Great Gatsby, which is about all sorts of things. Jay Gatsby, who turns out to be a big phony, but is known for his parties, he's fabulously rich. He's also a very sad character, but it's not narrated by Gatsby, although he does tell his story. It's narrated by a character called Nick, who's quite young and is quite clearly mesmerised by this character who he thinks is amazing and extraordinary and rich beyond the dreams of avarice, without questioning where the money comes from and what he's doing with it. So it's really about the 1920s, post-war, First World War America, before it all goes crazy in 1921, the status and wealth that everybody's obsessed with, and how Nick, who comes from the Midwest, Chicago, into this New York society and really gets swept away, and it's a tragedy as well.
Yeah.
Not just for Gatsby, but also for a couple of other characters as well. Fitzgerald, great American novel really, but in himself not necessarily a happy person. But he really captured the post-war period, where there was the relief and the excess, and the stock market was going through the roof, and then it all came crashing down, and eventually we got to the Second World War, and it was all hideous. So Nick he grows up, but he still
can't escape from the
can't
spell.
escape. No,
so to
that's
speak.
right. That's right.
Really in love with the idea of Gatsby.
Yeah.
If not so much Gatsby himself.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah. And it's all was all suggested not just by the society that Fitzgerald was experiencing himself, but also by a classical character called Trimalchio, an ex-slave in a Roman comedy, I think it is, and the things he does to excess that the Roman audiences would have found funny, but actually was very true of the society in Rome, where slaves became rich after being freed and emulated their old masters and went to over excesses as well. So it's quite interesting. So that's my unreliable narrator for today.
Yeah, that's a great example in literature, and we haven't been able to touch on all of them, but I think we covered quite a lot of good ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.